Welcome to Georgia Peachcast, coming to you from Cherokee County, Georgia. And today's host by Pat.
Greg.
And Liev.
Subjects and contents will cover our local and national issues and community activities and interests.
All right, so today's topics is one that is both national and universal: reproductive and women's rights. As promised, the truth is the basis of our podcast, and our purpose is to inform, not to judge. Folks, what do you think? Leave your comments as we do the show.
Let's get to us talking about reproductive health care in modern America. Let's let Liev with some questions. Now, Liev, even separate from being a woman on the show, you have special insights and topics from the career and education. Isn't that right?
That's right. I grew up deeply Catholic, and I was actually what I called pro-life at the time. As a teenager in high school, I was even in the pro-life club. It was a Catholic high school. I went on to attend Mount Holyoke College with a politics major, and there was a strong focus on philosophy, and I pursued that myself. And that was specifically ethics, gender relations, and feminist theory. And then after my college years, I took a personal interest in and I independently studied evolutionary psychology, the ways that we are hardwired as a species to behave and to think, our general tendencies that our modern life hasn't necessarily caught up with. And evolution is a slow process. So we are evolutionarily still in our deep past. And that informs a lot of our decisions that I want to talk about here. But in all of the study that I pursued independently, I am a very opinionated person, so I've developed a lot of theories, and I have already written at least a book's worth that just needs to be compiled and published. Unashamed plug.
So, what are your thoughts about the moral questions involved in the choice of having an abortion or not?
And I do have a lot of those thoughts. I think that that's a very important part of the discussion that people don't get to. So there are slogans, there are what we are now recognizing as thought terminating cliches, and then all thought stops beyond that. We come to a certain conclusion. But I like to push beyond that a little bit and to ask why. Why have we decided what we've decided? What are the reasons that the taking of a life is wrong to start with? Should we just assume that it is in all cases wrong? What determines life? What defines life? The things that make it wrong, the criteria that make the taking of a life bad, are that the individual doesn't want to die. We want our lives more than almost anything ever. So to rob someone of their future, of their experience, is very harmful. And we want to look at harm versus benefit in real terms. So another harm would be that the process of dying is usually very painful and very distressing in and of itself. There's that existential torment of the loss of one's life. Then there's also the fact that those in our community, those who love us, would then go through the torment of grief, which is itself psychological torture. So we have to bear in mind the people who are affected by the ending of that life, not just the life itself. The community is robbed of the contributions of that individual, assuming they contribute in some good way. There's that. None of these conditions is present in the case of an abortion. Absolutely zero. We know through fetal anesthesiology and studies on the fetus that they have no ability to experience pain. There's no anatomical structure to allow for an experience of pain before 24 weeks. And that's established in fetal anesthesiology. And about 99% of abortions are performed by 15 weeks. There's no sentience. So there's no will to live. There's no fear of death. There is no pain. There's no longing for what could be. There's no sentience. There's no desire to live. There is no fear of death. There is no physical pain, nothing. Um, those in one's community are irrelevant because there is no community surrounding that zygote, that fetus. And furthermore, even the people involved in the conception of that zygote or fetus, the man and the woman, they can decide for themselves whether they want to experience this loss, if it will be a loss, and what is for the best. And there are men in boardrooms everywhere who decide people's lives or deaths. There are people in boardrooms everywhere who decide the fate of people, even whether they live or die. Looking at, for example, friendly fire. What are the statistics involved? Knowing that some innocents in a war-torn country will be harmed if there is a military strike there. So if men in suits can make decisions of life versus death involving living children and people of all ages, then to do that for what they consider to be the best possible outcome in which the taking of life can happen, then why are women not respected and trusted with the same decision involving their families, involving their own lives, looking at harm versus benefit, which is what all moral decision making involves at the core of it, whether we realize it or not. So there are no criteria present for making abortion wrong. In the case, going back to the parents, if the father is affected emotionally by the woman choosing to end that pregnancy, she's the one most affected. So it's really for her to decide. A man, if he wants a child, he can find a willing partner in that, or he can spend the money for a surrogate and find out why it's so expensive because what the woman is incurring.
So, you know, just to kind of interject a personal anecdote here, I went through that exact thing you were just talking about. So when I was in college, it was college, and my girlfriend at the time got pregnant, and the way I found out that she was going to have an abortion is she said, "Well, I made an appointment. I want you to go with me." And I got to tell you, it was an emotional roller coaster for me because I had never thought about being a father. I was just rolling through college, doing my thing, and it was from start to finish. Her logical attitude and understandable attitude was, "This is my body, this is my choice. I just want you there for emotional support," which I was happy to do.
Right.
But internally for me, I had a struggle of, I had to deal with those feelings, and they are minuscule compared to what she was going through.
Thank you.
Absolutely minuscule, and I know that. So, and I think that's what a lot of men don't even bother to pause and think about. It's like you said, they get to that point, they make up their mind, and then they're done.
A big reason why I think when it comes to decisions that affect women and laws and policies and attitudes that affect women is that our mental muscles for empathy, for relating to others,
Hmm.
really are exercised when it comes to men's experience through no one's fault here. But it's simply that the main character has typically been the boy or the man, and women have been accessories to that in so many stories. And you'll notice when you see an animal in the wild, in our mind, for a lot of us, it's a he or him off the bat, even though in every sexually reproducing species, females of the species are at least half of the population. So it's almost like imaginatively we are Burkified.
Yeah.
Right. And so it's hard to relate to the female experience. Men also pride yourselves naturally on your strength. And throughout our evolution, men have thrived through their strength,
Mm.
protecting their families, fighting off, any dangers. But in order to emphasize men's strength, on a certain level, you're psychologically wanting to distance yourselves from the femininity of women because it's just this symbolism there. Femininity actually, on a deep level for men, means weakness
Mm-hmm.
comparatively, on the physical level. So men almost just want to stay away from that instinctually. And so just even identifying with women, empathizing with women can kind of have that reaction that I'm not that because I'm strong. But it makes sense where it's coming from,
Mm-hmm.
but it has harmful effects.
Right.
Yeah.
So what about the argument that, once has occurred, life deserves to continue? I mean, you did expound on that a little bit just a moment ago.
Right.
But a lot of, particularly faith-based people, these are, let's face it, largely the people that have a problem with this. Um, they would just say, well, the Lord gives life, only the Lord should have the power to take it away. So, and is that kind of folds into what you were saying earlier, that it's the woman's choice largely, and there's the moral dilemma is there's always consequences, and we have to look at who is most affected by this
Right.
decision.
Right. So what I
So,
learned in philosophy class more years ago than I can count off the bat, what I learned in my study of philosophy is there were many systems that philosophers have tried to piece together to figure out how, in any circumstance regarding anything, do we always apply the right thinking to always be able to come to the best possible decision.
right,
So, looking at all these different systems of thought, Kantian, and so on, um, I really found that utilitarianism was the most universally applied because it just makes the most sense. It is when a decision must be made and harm is unavoidable, we are always to make the decision that minimizes that harm. And that means the severity of harm, the duration of the harm,
hmm,
right? And then also the number of those who will be harmed.
right,
And then if good can be achieved or utility in this structure, this logical structure, you want to maximize good,
right,
the extent of the good, the intensity of the good, if you will, the duration of the good, and the number of people or creatures
hmm,
benefited,
yeah,
right? So we're looking at abortion, we're thinking, is there even any harm?
hmm,
And can we explain what that harm is? Some would say that the prison industrial complex, which is, of course, for profit,
right,
benefits from lots of unwanted pregnancies because, lo and behold, as Freakonomics authors, what's his name, excellent people, look them up, as they found about 16 years after an abortion ban is instituted nationwide in any country, the crime rate goes up precipitously because all of these unwanted babies are in dysfunctional situations, and that's the age when they can act out.
right,
So we're seeing greater harm to greater numbers of people. Whereas if we ignore the harm done to the woman, because again, our empathy muscles when it comes to women are not exercised, we're not understanding her lived experience. Inside that experience, we don't have the full picture,
right,
right?
right,
And men have been the way they are, and society has been that way for thousands of years. And although you would think it might be in their DNA, I don't believe it's. I think it's just that in 2,000, 3,000, 4,000 years, that's the way it's been. And as it's been that way, people and men specifically have a hard time to go to the next level. And you talked about how they react to a woman and who's going to be harmful, who's going to be harmed. And men don't even think about it from that aspect at all.
hmm,
They think that only, what's good for them. It is, to my opinion, again, of old school. All right, just the macho man thing exists, and it plays into the point of what a woman should do and what a woman shouldn't do and what they want a woman to do, not what's good for the woman, not what's good for the child.
Right.
Okay.
There are many ways to look at this, how it profits men, and yet it's sort of like, and I can't remember where I read this, but it's sort of like when a child wants a puppy. And the parent says to the child, "Are you going to take care of the puppy? Are you going to buy the puppy food from the grocery store?" And, the response might be, "I don't know how to grocery shop."
Yeah.
And there's a joke to be found there. Now, you did ask, and I wanted to finish answering your question, that was spiritually. So we're looking at it in decision making and ethics, but at the spiritual level, some would say God has the right to give, or God gives life. So therefore, God can take life away. That's according to one religion,
Right.
one of many religions, and some of us don't follow a religion. So we are supposed to have a country that keeps nation and religion separate.
Right.
But not only that, it seems just so arbitrary to lean on this way of looking at it, which is a very patriarchal religion. Spiritually, you could say instead that if pregnancy is unintended, then that soul has been taken mistakenly out of the trajectory, right, from which it was already on to its rightful life, and that the woman who is pregnant can release that soul back to the universe to live the life that it is intended for. I mean, that might seem really out there for a lot of people, but how is that any less weighty than any other argument about when life begins and whether it's precious in some way or needs to be guarded or accommodated, even to the vast expense of a whole breathing, walking member of our community.
Right.
You brought up being a Catholic and brought up being a Catholic, and I've always wanted to continue to point this out. I grew up as a Catholic, and I'm older than everybody else around here. So back in the days, there was no fetus or even a unborn child that ever going to heaven, not having been baptized. And at the same time, the church didn't baptize children, or not aborted children, because we didn't talk about abortion in those days, but you had miscarriages. So those children weren't children as far as the Catholic Church considered. This, they did not have a soul that was going to go to heaven. They were going to go to limbo for the rest of whatever eternities. Yet that same Catholic religion today is entirely different. They are going along with where the fetus is and when the fetus became a person. So they're contradicting things that are, in my mind, 60, 70 years old, even within their own thing. And that's exactly the problem that has to be dealt with. So,
Well, to touch on that too, I mean, even as children, okay, sure, they're baptized, but they're not considered truly part of the Catholic faith. Correct me if I'm wrong on this, unless they go through communion. And that's when they really accept God and Jesus as their Savior into their heart. Am I wrong on that? Or
yeah, I think that the
what's the
the,
point of
bapti-
communion?
the baptism, that brings you closer to Christ, as I remember their terminology or the reasoning for having that, and being allowed to experience the body and blood of Jesus Christ.
Right.
Okay.
That was
But
my
it's
experience, though, Greg, what you're describing. When I was baptized late, and in fact, it really was a welcoming into the church, and we were
Okay.
not really considered part of the church. And um, indeed, if we had died before we had been baptized,
Right.
then we would not have
Your souls would have never
we would not
experienced.
have had a
Yeah.
complete soul, which is
Yeah.
interesting. And a physical analogy of this, by the way, of this sort of cognitive dissonance, is that people who consider the involuntary twitching and the medical gruesomeness of any videos of an abortion procedure that they may have watched as perhaps some anti-choice conditioning. It can be disturbing, but then again, any surgery could be. But they're imagining pain in a 12 week fetus, right?
Right.
They're imagining that and feeling terrible for the fetus. A lot of these people are the same ones who think that a male being circumcised 3 days after he's been born doesn't feel any pain because he's too young to experience pain.
Oh, you feel the pain, you just don't remember it, thank God. You know what I mean? So,
Uh, if time allows,
oh no, we're here.
we're up at the top.
Yeah.
Okay. What can women do in uncertain situations where a woman's right can be taken away from her, and even in a blue state?
Right, exactly. Even a very happily married couple, they want to add to their family.
Right.
They might live in Massachusetts, they might live in Minnesota, California. But because of the uncertain political situation that we find ourselves in, we don't know that 3 months down the road, 8 months down the road, a national abortion ban will be in effect. And
Right.
suddenly, if there is a miscarriage, which is very common,
Yeah.
the woman's life could be at stake. So now I will refer to this, but I think this is a whole other episode in itself. But just saying, a lot of women are considering the 4B movement that comes out of Korea.
Right.
And we are actually asking, men to ally with us in this. We can understand that a husband wouldn't want to risk his wife's life by insisting on pregnancy in a situation like we are in this country right now.
Right.
But if pregnancy should occur, something that's incredibly powerful, and I hope this reaches so many women and teenage girls, is that there's such a thing as a menagogues. You can Google this yourself if you have a bunch of parsley in your smoothie in the morning and your period's a couple days late. You have that great big bunch of parsley to your smoothie, and the next day your period can appear and everything is fine. If you want to just make absolutely sure, you can take ascorbic acid form of vitamin C, not liposomal form and not ester form. It has to be ascorbic acid. You do 1,000 milligrams of that, maybe 5 or 6 times over the course of a day. Within a day, maybe two, period arrives. If you wanted to eat a lot of garlic over the course of a day, if you wanted to eat a lot of ginger, lemon balm tea at the end of the day, it will make you a little drowsy. And there are some others, you can look them up, but these are everyday grocery store items. This must be done within 2 weeks of the expected first day of period, just to make sure that it will actually work. And people can combine methods. And this is why some women end up having hysterectomies. They have no idea what's causing all their extra periods. They can have a
Right.
period every 2 weeks because, oh, they're drinking lemon balm tea.
Right.
Now, the other thing that we can do is for women who are happily pregnant, but they're experiencing a miscarriage and their life is at risk until no fetal heartbeat is detected, and then she can get the life-saving surgery that she needs, or abortion that she needs, a procedure to stave off sepsis. She can again do the very high dose, very frequent vitamin C. It's perfectly safe to do. Must be ascorbic acid or liposomal form or ester form. If it's liposomal, you can do it every 3 to 4 hours. Again, 1,000 milligrams can be 1,500 milligrams every 3 or 4 hours. If ascorbic acid, every hour, 1,000 milligrams. You're going to want to do an antacid every few hours to prevent sore stomach. But that can keep you alive until the fetal heartbeat stops.
Okay. That's all really good information. And it was rolling through my head the whole time you were saying that. It's like, okay, so before modern medicine, women were doing that because very often women were apothecaries and they were the guardians of herbology and knowing what herbs were medicinal and what were flavorful and a lot of that lore has been lost, of course, in our modern times. But,
Yeah.
I imagine that there were a lot of ways that women who did not want to keep a pregnancy uh, had besides, the gruesome coat hanger in an alley images from the 60s and
Yeah.
70s, you know, that were herb based. And that's what that sounds like to me.
Okay.
So,
Okay.
all right. Well,
All right. Our hope is that we We all try to understand each other's feelings, beliefs, concerns, and work toward common ground with the primary objective of everyone's health, mental and physical, emotional, and spiritual.
And if you like today's cast, push that like button. And if you really liked it, subscribe. And we're wishing you all the very best week possible here in the Peach State.